We are facing a crisis facing working families. We need to create millions of good-paying jobs. We need to tackle the existential threat of climate change. We need to expand health care and Medicare so that elderly people have dental care, eyeglasses, and hearing aids. We need to lower the cost of prescription drugs and have Medicare negotiate prices with the pharmaceutical industry. We need to make sure that we get doctors and nurses and dentists into underserved areas. Madam President, as a former mayor, I do understand how important physical infrastructure is. Roads, bridges, water systems, wastewater plants. And I am delighted that finally we are beginning to address our long-neglected physical infrastructure. Frankly, it is rather incredible that year after year we ignore crumbling bridges and roads. And as we address our physical infrastructure, we can create a whole lot of good-paying jobs. So that bill that we are discussing right now is enormously important. But, Madam President, I will tell you what is even more important, and that is to address the long-neglected needs of the working families of our country, of the children, of the elderly, of the sick, of the poor, whether they are black or white or Latino, Native American, Asian American. These are needs that Congress has ignored for much, much too long. Now, I understand that Senator McConnell, the Republican leader, and others are really shocked by this bill. They cannot believe it. Imagine, just imagine, that the United States Senate is addressing the needs of working families and is going to stand up for ordinary Americans rather than just the wealthy and powerful. What is this world coming to? Don't we understand that here in the Senate we're supposed to take campaign contributions from the drug companies and the insurance companies and the fossil fuel industry and from the 1% and do their bidding? Isn't that the way it has always been done here in the U.S. Senate? Well, Senator McConnell, things are changing. For once in a very long time, the United States Congress is going to stand with working families and not just the rich and the powerful. Madam President, the gap between the very, very rich and everybody else is wider today than it has been in 100 years. People on top doing phenomenally well. In fact, we have two people in America today who own more wealth than the bottom 40%. The top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 92%. And since 2009, the Wall Street collapse, 45% of all new income has gone to the top 1%. And incredibly, during the pandemic that we are experiencing now, billionaires in America have seen their wealth increase by $1.8 trillion during this pandemic, while at the same time, thousands of essential workers died, providing the goods and services we needed. Billionaires become richer. Ordinary people have to go to work, public transit, grocery stores, hospitals, and thousands die. While some of our multi-billionaires are spending some of their enormous amounts of money flying off into outer space, today and in the coming days, we are going to address the crises facing working families right here on the ground on planet Earth. And that is why, Madam President, as chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, I am proud to introduce a $3.5 trillion budget resolution that we will soon be considering, I expect tomorrow. This is a budget resolution that will allow the Senate to move forward on a reconciliation bill that, in my view, will be the most consequential and comprehensive piece of legislation for working people, for the elderly, for the children, for the sick, and for the poor that this body has addressed since Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the New Deal, and the 1930s. Madam President, this is a budget resolution that will address the needs of working families because we understand, if our Republican colleagues do not, that there is something fundamentally wrong when real inflation accounted for wages for working people has not gone up for almost 50 years. We have seen in recent years, as everybody knows, an explosion in technology, an explosion in worker productivity. And yet, in real inflation accounted for dollars, while the very, very rich become much richer, real inflation accounted for wages for workers has not gone up in almost 50 years. What does that mean? It means the cost of health care has soared, cost of education has soared, cost of housing has soared, and yet real workers, the working families of this country are earning in real dollars the same wages that they did decades ago, which means that many of them are struggling right now to keep their heads above water economically. Madam President, in the richest country in the history of the world, half of our people should not be living paycheck to paycheck, worried about how they're going to pay their rent or provide food for their kids. And this legislation, in so many ways, begins to address the working families of our country, but one important way, maybe the most important, is as we address the needs of our people in health care, in education, in climate, we are going to create many millions of good-paying jobs that the American people desperately need. Madam President, I want to say a few words today about the budget resolution that we are introducing and what is going to be in the reconciliation package that we will soon be undertaking. For a start, one of the questions that everybody is going to ask is, well, how is this going to be paid for? Expensive bill. $3.5 trillion, you know, that's a lot of money. It is. Well, I happen to think, and I know that you do as well, Madam President, that maybe, just maybe, the time is now for the wealthiest people in this country and the largest corporations who are doing phenomenally well, but in a given year, many of them have not paid a nickel in federal income tax. The average Joe, the average Mary out there, they're working, they're paying their fair share of taxes. But if you're an Amazon, if you're a Jeff Bezos, if you're one of these multi-billionaires, you got lobbyists, you got accountants, you got lawyers, and you can avoid paying your fair share of taxes. So what some of us are saying is that maybe, just maybe, even if you are a billionaire, even if you are a large, profitable corporation with all kinds of lobbyists and accountants, maybe you should start paying your fair share of taxes. My Republican friends say we're going to be raising taxes. Well, you're right, we are. But we're going to be raising taxes on the wealthiest people in this country, something which is long overdue And yet, nobody in America earning less than $400,000 a year will pay a nickel in taxes, and many, many will actually be paying less in taxes. So my Republican friends can complain all that they want, but I do believe, and the American people do believe, that the time is now for the wealthy, the powerful, for large profitable corporations to start paying their fair share so that, in fact, we can lower taxes for working families in this country. Madam President, 2 blocks away from where we are in the nation's capital, there is an encampment of homeless people. All over this city, you can't drive down the nation's capital and not see people sleeping out on the street. And that is true in virtually every major city in America. Once again, richest country in the history of the world, and some 600,000 Americans are homeless. And then on top of that, you got about 18 million households where people are spending 50% or more of their limited incomes to put a roof over their heads. Now, how do you survive economically if you're spending 50% of your income on housing? This legislation will create a huge number of good-paying jobs by the largest investment in American history in low-income and affordable housing. And I see the chairman of the Banking Committee here, and I want to thank Senator Brown for his important work in that area. Just a few days ago, I had a chat with a gentleman whose wife is seriously ill. He works, and he pays for the home health care that she needs. And it's an expensive proposition. What we understand is that in an aging society, and at a time when we have so many people with disabilities whose needs are not being met, that it makes eminent sense to bring skilled home health care workers into the home rather than to force people to go into a nursing home, which, by the way, is more expensive. And this legislation, reconciliation bill that we will soon be working on, will make historic investments in home health care and make sure that those workers, like child care workers, who do such important work, are adequately compensated. As we go forward, in all likelihood, we will not get one Republican vote. We're going to have to do it on our own with 50 Democratic votes here in the Senate, plus the Vice President of the United States. Now, some of my Republican friends will say, well, that's such a bad idea. Why aren't you more bipartisan in terms of reconciliation? Well, I would remind my Republican colleagues that they didn't have a problem with reconciliation when they gave almost $2 trillion in tax breaks to the very richest people in this country and the largest corporations. No problem doing that. They didn't have a problem with reconciliation when they tried to throw 30 million people off of the health care they had by abolishing the Affordable Care Act. So that's where we are. We are facing a crisis facing working families. We need to create millions of good-paying jobs. We need to tackle the existential threat of climate change. We need to expand health care and Medicare so that elderly people have dental care, eyeglasses, and hearing aids. We need to lower the cost of prescription drugs and have Medicare negotiate prices with the pharmaceutical industry. We need to make sure that we get doctors and nurses and dentists into underserved areas.